It's enough years. No, you need to know when you worked at a particular company and for how many years, because when you are doing your online application for scheme, you need to be very specific. You worked at Montego Bay Club 2000 to 2010. You worked at Dundee 1985 to 1990. So you have to be very specific.
And for those people who may want to subdivide land and build with other like-minded individuals,
cluster housing has been renamed and rebranded, and it is now called Build 9. Okay, so it's no longer cluster, it's Build 9. So what is Build 9? It is a facility where we allow groups of persons to acquire land, and the NHG will assist with subdivision of the land, splintering of the title, and installation of the infrastructure.
the land must be subdivided into a minimum of 3 lots or a maximum of 9. Hence the name Build 9.
It's an opportunity for you to create your own community. So you build the community that you want, you design the community you want, you live with people that you can be happy with and comfortable with.
Sounds good, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Ready, sign me up.
Not so fast.
I want to go through some of the things that persons must bear in mind when they're ready to own a home, or they're going to buy land, or you are going to buy a home, or you're going to build on land that you already own. There are some expenses that you must prepare for. And so a sale agreement, you have to pay for that. You have to pay a valuator to do a valuation report. You have to pay a surveyor to do a survey on the property to ensure that there are no breaches or encroachment. So the property is not on your neighbor property, and the house is not too close to the border, those simple things.
In addition, you need to have the attorney fee, which is usually 3% of the sale agreement and sometimes more. For more information, please contact the National Housing Trust at its corporate office, 4 Park Boulevard, Kingston 5, or give them a call at 876-929-6500-9. Happy house hunting!
Good day, I'm Theodore Henry, and this is your JIS News for Tuesday, April 9, 2024. $25 million has been allocated to truck water to drought-stricken areas of Hanover and Westmoreland over the next 6 weeks. This is among several measures being taken by the government to alleviate water shortage in both parishes. Minister with responsibility for water, Senator Matthew Samuda, gave the update while meeting with stakeholders from both parishes in Negril on Thursday.
We've identified funds to purchase 2,000 tanks for Hanover and Westmoreland citizens who are most in need, and those will be distributed as soon as the purchase and the delivery takes place. We also outlined the major capital works, which include lines from Martha Brain to St. James, which does benefit the Great River system because then you have less pressure on the Great River system for St. James. We'll update the Great River system and indeed several other systems in Westmoreland. We'll also be doing $70 million of pipe work starting later this year.
According to the minister, Hanover and Westmoreland are among the parishes experiencing chronic drought, the impact of which is being felt by citizens and business operators. Approximately 1,000 Jamaicans from across the globe will converge on the island to create and strengthen business opportunities. The occasion is the staging of the 10th Biennial Jamaica Diaspora Conference set for June 16 to 19. It is the first time the highly anticipated conference is being held in person since the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2024 staging was launched last week by Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith. She says the conference affirms the importance of coming together to bring transformation to key areas of focus.
Quite simply, at this conference, connections will be made. Partnerships will be born. Some will be strengthened. Business opportunities are going to be created. You have to be there to be a part of it all. The experience will be that much richer if you are on the ground. And for those of you who have come before, you know it's good. And this one is going to be better.
This year's event will be held under the theme, United for Jamaica's Transformation, Fostering Peace, Productivity and Youth Empowerment. Registration is now open.
We will continue the important tradition of honoring diasporans who have worked hard and made significant contributions in their communities, and as such, the Governor General's Award for Excellence will be a feature this year. Our usual marketplace and government at your service will be available, along with a range of other goods and services that we can assure will be of interest to you. There will be other exciting offerings that will certainly make your attendance at the conference a worthwhile feature, whilst of course making good linkages for trade and investment opportunities, not just here in Jamaica, but also taking those trade and investment opportunities to your respective areas across the diaspora.
The community of Freetown in northwestern Manchester is benefiting from free access to Wi-Fi service. It is part of the government's mission to install internet in communities across all 63 constituencies. The work was carried out by the Universal Service Fund, USF. Principal of the St. Paul's Primary School, Vinicia Fuller Brown, encouraged students in the area to embrace the technology as a source for good and to use it responsibly.
Technology is one of the vehicles run by the education system. And this is where we are going now. And so we have to embrace technology.
Member of Parliament Michael Phillips said the availability of the internet connection
Delano, 1 minute. Hi, good morning and welcome to another edition of our post-cabinet press briefing. I want to welcome all those who are viewing us online, as well as also welcome members of the media who are here. This morning it's a special edition to deal particularly with the current water challenges that are facing our country. And I'd like to welcome Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Senator the Honorable Samuda, as well as the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Ms. Arlene Williams, and from the National Water Commission, Mr. Kevin Carr, who is the acting president, and also among his team, Mr. Charles Buchanan, who is the Manager of Communications and Public Relations, Mr. Delano Williams, Acting Corporate Relations Manager, and in the area of the Met Service, Principal Director, Mr. Evan Thompson, who is very familiar to us, as well as Mr. Peter Clark, who is the Manager of the Water Resources Authority, and Ms. Nuri Bennett, Acting Managing Director of the Rural Water Supply Limited. We will start off with presentations from the various entities. The Minister will manage that process, after which we will take questions from members of the media. Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Minister Morgan, and I also extend welcome and thanks to all who have joined us in person and indeed online. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of my Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Arlene Williams, indeed senior staff of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and several agency heads who you will hear from this morning related to the water sector. I acknowledge Mr. Evan Thompson, Mr. Peter Clark, Mr. Kevin Carr, and indeed all members of the team who are here. It is impatient of debate that Jamaica is feeling the impact of drought. How we will approach the discussion this morning is that I will ask in this particular order Mr. Evan Thompson, Mr. Peter Clark, and Mr. Kevin Carr to make presentations. These presentations will ensure that you have the accurate information as it relates to rainfall, hydrological flows, and indeed the impact on the National Water Commission. And then we will spend a little time at the back end of that on our response. As the Prime Minister would have announced yesterday, I will go into a little bit more detail on the national emergency response, and then we will field questions. Perhaps you could join me, Mr. Thompson, and we'll get started with the presentation from the Met Service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and good morning, everyone. I want to acknowledge Minister Morgan and P.S. Williams, first of all, and then, of course, all distinguished persons, all members of the media. I'm going to just give a brief update on the dry season, basically. We are in the dry season that would normally begin just about in December and continue until April. So we are still in that period that is traditionally our dry season, but from time to time we also experience drought, which really, in the case of the Meteorological Service, what we measure is meteorological drought, which specifically looks at the amount of rainfall that we experience and it compares that to the traditional norms. So when it falls appreciably below the norm, then we begin to characterize or classify as drought, whether normal, severe, or extreme. Now, in the case of Jamaica, I wanted to take us back a little bit. If we look at this image, I wanted to, first of all, what is happening right now in terms of the rainfall that has been experienced across Jamaica from October of last year, which is when we would normally have the primary peak in our rainfall seasons. We have the primary peak in October, and then we would see the fall off in rainfall in November and December, and then in January, February, March, we would see the lowest levels. That's the norm. So in this past season, as we move to October, look back at October 2023, we see where the levels of rainfall were, they were actually just over 80% of normal, which means that it was below what is usually expected for the rainfall season, which kind of sets us back. We normally expect a good amount of rainfall, an appreciable amount of rainfall in that rainfall season to take us right through the dry season. So we saw that we experienced about 80%. This is Jamaica on average. And then in November, it went up over 100%, yes. And December also, we had significantly above normal rainfall. But then we saw the dip occurring in January, and that is when the very dry conditions started to set in. Drought conditions were gradually being experienced moving into February. And I have given some information here about March. Really, this is a preliminary figure, just about 50% of normal, and that is because we've been collecting some of our automatic weather station data to give us an idea of what is being experienced. But the fulsome picture will be unraveled a little bit later this month for March. But when we take a look back at the image of what occurred in the year prior, we'll see that in October of 2022, we had below that 80% rainfall as well, but the figures continued to fall as we moved through November and December, January and February. And so we went into what was our most intense drought period in history. It was increased in terms of rainfall in March, but this just compares to what we experienced this year. Not as bad, but still experiencing very dry conditions this year and also drought conditions. So at the end of February, which is where we have the fulsome set of data, all 13 parishes received below normal rainfall. And this is for the month of February. And the map will give a good indication where in February of this year, we see on the left side on the image, the reds, of course, or the deeper shades of orange will show where the drier periods were experienced. And in the normal picture on the right shows us that in the northeast of the island, that's where we expect most of the rainfall, which is the general pattern in Jamaica, and we fell way short of that generally across the island, but we see the impact mostly in the northeast. 6 parishes were actually being characterized as experiencing drought, which was all the way in the west, Hanover and Westmoreland, and then some southern parishes in St. Elizabeth and Clarendon, and then in the northeast with Portland and St. Mary. When we look at the monitor, SPI is a standardized precipitation index, and this gives an idea of what kind of dryness we experience across the island. The shades show moving from exceptionally dry conditions to exceptionally wet conditions, which we did not experience during that period of January to February. Drought is assessed over a period of 2 months. That's why we have January and February here. And that assessment showed that much of the dryness that we experienced was concentrated in the western part of the island. So based on the level of rainfall experienced during March, the drought conditions are expected to have been exacerbated because we saw no appreciable rainfall during March based on the preliminary data that we have collected. And it was becoming more severe for those parishes that were already seeing drought. And we expected that it would be gradually increasing over other parishes because of the dryness that we've been experiencing in the past month, and of course going into April thus far. Although there are some areas where we experience a little bit of rainfall, it's still well below what we would consider to be appreciable rainfall. So it does not put us in a favorable position because the conditions will continue to be dry for a period. Looking at the outlook, though, the rainfall outlook for April, May, and June, we see that there is some improvement that is likely to occur. It probably will not set in immediately because we are in the month of April, and as we see in this forecast here, or the outlook, it shows that the western part of the island will continue to experience quite a bit of dryness, even more so than the rest of the country. Others will gradually start to see the rainfall coming in, and we expect it to become above normal, but this might happen more toward the end of this period. This is in May, in June, when we expect the secondary rainfall peak to occur across the country. So that's the outlook. Western parishes of Hanover and Westmoreland showing just 40 to 50% likelihood of that continued drying trend. That's basically it for the report and the forecast for this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It sounds like we will need indeed a rain dance. But I would use the opportunity now to welcome Mr. Peter Clark from the Water Resources Authority to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Minister. And good morning, everybody. Good morning, PS. And good morning, my colleagues. With regards to the water resources, as Evan said, there are different kinds of droughts. With regards to our consideration for drought, we speak about hydrological droughts. And for hydrological droughts, that is evident when you have an impact on your groundwater reserves. At this time, we're not seeing a major impact on our groundwater reserves, so it's not that we're going to say that there's a hydrological drought, but there is a major concern because our rivers, which are largely rain-fed, and responding to the lack of rain, it shows that they are now down in terms of levels. So I'll just quickly, which one does it? Yeah, I'm pressing. Well, the thing is that, let me just tell you why we are here in the first place. The Water Resources Authority is responsible for the allocation, the management of water resources, and as such we do monitoring. So we monitor across the island, both groundwater and surface water. What we've done is we've looked at some selected rivers with regards to their surface water, with regards to their flows. Flows are relative, and we relate the flows to what would be a reliable flow. When we look at the reliable flow for our rivers, what we see is that, generally speaking, we are not far off our reliable flow in many situations. However, what we are noticing is that definitely there are lower flows in February right now than there were in the month before January. So we're looking here at the Plant and Garden River, and I've selected a few rivers across the island. So with regards to the Plant and Garden River, for last month it had a flow of 102 million gallons per day, and in February right now it has 24 million gallons per day. Last year, this time, it was 5.7 million gallons. And that corresponds to what Mr. Thompson was saying, that last year we saw a very significant dry period, and that impacted us. And the rivers respond to that. So you can see that that's what's happening with Plant and Garden River. With the Buff Bay River, it's the same thing. January, it was 59, going 60 million gallons per day. And in February, it's down to 15.7 million gallons per day. So these drops are significant. The Rio Minnow from 19 down to 10 in a month, but still significantly less. For the Rio Cobre from 110 to 82. For the Great River from 40 to 15. And the Roaring River from 39 to 24. However, in terms of the, and this is interesting, in terms of the reliable flow for Roaring River, it's normally 23.6 million gallons per day, that figure that you see at the top. And this supports our recommendation, and it supports what the minister has been advancing, that we'll have to look to the Roaring River, for instance, in the west, and see if we can do upgrades in that area to help to alleviate water challenges in the west. This supports and shows that the adequacy definitely is there. In the short term, of course, the responses will be trucking, and this is anticipated, and this is being supported by the minister and by what has been coming out of the adjustments being made with in terms of financing and so on to divert funds into that. And of course, rainwater harvesting. My colleagues are here from the Rural Water Supply Limited, and we've worked with them in terms of determining, and with the Met Service in terms of determining where it would be best to target with our responses for rainwater harvesting, both with schools and with communities. And also, in the medium term, we will have to continue to support the Forestry Department with the reforestation that they're doing through the 3 million trees project. In the medium term, also, we know that the Ministry of Agriculture is looking at restoring and building out some more micro dams. They currently have 5, and there's one that's separate at the Hope Gardens. I just issued a license for one yesterday. So in the short to medium term, this is something that they will have to be looking at, and that is a part of their own response. And also in the medium term, we'll have to continue to fast track our developments. The Water Resources Authority has just released a license for the Content Water Supply Limited. We've just released a license for National Water Commission for the Montgomery Corner wells, which are there near to the back of Crossroads post office there, so that it can bring more water into the KMA. We are doing the studies now to assist them with what they can develop in wells in Agwalta Vale. Minister just advised me that Ita Boreal is pretty dry in that area, So this is a part of what will respond to that. And generally speaking, those are our short to medium term responses. And the WRA, of course, in terms of giving support, is always there to give the support, to try to work with the science so that we can give the best information that is possible, give the data that is needed so that the decisions can be made. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that presentation, Peter. I'm going to ask now Acting President of the National Water Commission, Mr. Kevin Carr, to join us to explain what that means in practical terms, because there are 3 known types of drought: meteorological, hydrological, and agricultural. But in Jamaica, we also know that those 3 can translate to becoming a utility drought. But Mr. Carr will go through the impact on our systems.
Thank you, Minister. Morning, everyone. Morning, Minister Morgan, our PS colleagues from Met Office, WRA, Royal Supply Limited, 2 communication support, Delon and Charles, our media partners, our other viewers in Media Land, the employees of the NWC. Allow me to wish you all a pleasant day. So, my presentation here today is to inform you of the current impact on the NWC system, and so that you are more informed in understanding the steps that the NWC have been taken to minimize the breakdown in the level of service during this time. So this presentation will be in 4 parts. First, we look at the weather ramification. We will look at the major systems that are impacted. Third, we look at the implications for the NWC. And finally, we look at the next steps for consumers, customers, citizens, and how we intend to change how we operate. First, let us look at weather ramification. Previously, my colleague Evan shared the situation, and as indicated on the map of Jamaica, there will be further impact westward of Jamaica. So the systems that are currently impacted, Lagwood, Bulls Road, Kendall, New Mills, Jerusalem Mountain, will continue to be impacted in the coming months. On the western side, inflows into KSA supply zone, which is served predominantly from the Mona Reservoir and the Hermitage Dam, will have low inflows. In addition, on the northeastern side of the island, will continue to experience impact on those sources that serve our customers. Next, so we will put some things in place to minimize the impact of the 70 systems of 450 that are currently impacted by drought. We have increased the number of trucking in these areas. We have also implemented schedule to intermittently serve our customer base in this period. The major systems that are impacted, as I said earlier, Lagwood Water Treatment Plant, which serves both Hanover and Westmoreland, the Bulls Road Water Treatment Plant, which serves Central Westmoreland, Mona Reservoir, KMA, and Hermitage, which I will share the levels as of yesterday in subsequent slides. In addition, there's a well system in St. Minard water supply system, which for over a month was impacted by failure due to the well casing. We have subsequent restored that pumping operation. It is now operating at 60%, and we have boosted the supply by continuing to truck to our customers, and we are prioritizing our health institutions and schools as high priority. There is also activity to replace that well, and we are now at 50% in the drilling activity. As of yesterday, April 9, the level at the Mona Reservoir was at 77.1%. The estimated level before we further restrict the water supply served by this reservoir is 65%. At the Hermitage Dam, we are, as of yesterday, we're at 79.1%. Similar to Mona, we will further restrict how the water is distributed from this dam when we arrive at 65%. So you can, these levels are shared on our website daily. You can visit it so you can be informed of the changes in levels daily. Next, we will share the activities that the NWC have put in place to further mitigate the impact on our system. So there are 4 key activities that we will continue to pursue. We will increase water transfer. If it gets worse, we will transfer water from the Raya system into KSA. We will further do nightly adjustments. We will continue to do emergency check-ins for areas that are not able to accommodate pipe supply. And finally, we will introduce wells to augment some existing source. My colleague Peter shared earlier that he has recently granted us a license to utilize the recently drilled Montgomery Carmona well, which will support the KSA water supply scheme that is within Crossroads and environs leading to downtown Kingston. Also to share, we last financial period, which is related to the drought period that we have passed in 2023-2024, the NWC expended some 380 million Jamaican dollars on trucking, and we are projected in this drought period to spend some 400 million. In addition to the reducing inflows to our surface sources, we are projected to lose 2.1 billion in our revenue over the period. So we continue to depend on our customers and the citizens to report leaks to the NWC, report abuse at fire hydrants, report illegal connections, and we are giving our commitment that we'll be responsive in addressing your feedback once we receive them. So our next step for our consumers and customers, that you should continue to store and conserve the use for water. So in recapping, we look at the ramification on the NWC systems. We have looked at the impact on our major systems. We have also shared what we plan to do and the next steps for our customers, consumers, and the citizens. And finally, I will share a common quote that most Jamaicans are familiar with. The people want water. So there is never a time that we need rain like now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Minister Morgan, with your leave, I'll make a few comments and then we'll open up to questions. It's important that citizens note that the government did not allow drought to creep up on us in terms of its planning. The government, through the IWRMC, which is the Integrated Water Resource Management Council, meets and also has a drought management committee that meets in and out of drought to examine the response and to fine-tune its emergency responses when we know this comes. As Evan and Peter and Mr. Carr would have referred to a while ago, we do know the cyclical impact of reduced rainfall. But I think we have to contemplate drought in the context of the work that we have done, because it shows a clear path to developing resilience and to ensuring that the impact of future droughts continues to get less and less as we build out our infrastructure in the country. For the Kingston and St. Andrew and Portmore area, we have to discuss drought in the context of, I would say, pre-non-revenue water and post-non-revenue water exercise having started. In the Kingston and St. Andrew area in 2015, when the project started, the non-revenue water was approximately 72%, correct, Kevin? Now, we, through significant investment and working with our implementation partners, have brought the non-revenue water to 38% in Kingston and St. Andrew. It means you have virtually cut leaks and theft in half. Now, what has that practically meant? In 2015, you needed 55 million gallons of water for the corporate area daily. With all the wonderful development that this government has facilitated and triggered with sound economic management, we now need 38 million gallons of water daily in the corporate area. With increasing development and an increasing population, you are using less water. It means we are more water resilient in the corporate area. Now, 38% is too high, and the approximate assessments in Portmore is still too high, even though we've extended the project there. But it does show you where the Water Commission and indeed the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation are headed and the benefit of the infrastructure investments that we are indeed making. These infrastructure investments reduce water leakage, reduce energy costs, and allow us to expand our infrastructural investment. So I say that in the context that there is a route to reducing the impact of drought. What we also need to contemplate, certainly for the corporate area, and I'll get into the rest of the country shortly, is that last year, in February 2023, in the worst of our worst drought, where Kingston and St. Andrew got 8%, correct, Evan, of our 30-year average of rainfall, not 8% below, but 8% of our 30-year rainfall average. We were underserved by 12.5 million gallons in the corporate area daily. This government has entered into a PPP arrangement and has broken ground for a water treatment plant in Content, St. Catherine. This water treatment plant will add 15 million gallons daily to the system. So we're starting to see how the infrastructural investments will come together. Because if you are short 12.5 million gallons in the worst of the worst drought, and you're adding 15 million gallons, you see that you are better able to serve Spanish Town, Portmore, and Kingston and St. Andrew. Now, it doesn't mean that that is the be-all and end-all of our infrastructure investments. It is why you would see that huge blue pipeline coming into Kingston along Mandela. It is why the government moved to change the main distribution line along Spanish Town Road. It is why later this year we expect to break ground on the line to the Forest Hills line. Now that practically will benefit the communities from the pretty much right throughout Red Hills and that general area, which has had a chronic water shortage for certainly all of my life. So areas like Cooper's Hill that have never not had a challenge will cease to have that challenge, and we're building in the resilience and continue to cut our non-revenue water rates. But ladies and gentlemen, I also want to highlight two other projects, not because I couldn't do what the Prime Minister did yesterday and spend an hour going through every individual project, of which we have $5 billion of capital works program this year for potable water and $2.5 billion of infrastructure works for sewage, and of course $1.6 billion to be spent through rural water. And I failed to acknowledge the team, and I apologize earlier for my lack of mention earlier. So we're making unprecedented investments, but there are two in particular that the country needs to be aware of. And I can get into the geographic sensitivities if there are questions raised, and I want to assure the public that there are major capital works in every corner of the country. But two projects that the country should be aware of, because this is a route to our resilience. One is the National Non-Revenue Water Program. What would have been done in Kingston and St. Andrew and Portmore was indeed a pilot project, and yes, a very long pilot project, because it would have started in the latter parts of 2015. But it has given us the route and a transaction design to go to tender for a national non-revenue water program that we expect to last some 10 years. Yes, 10 years, because that's the volume of construction that will indeed be required to change out, in some cases, pipes which are 70 and 80 years old. In most cases, 40. Pipes are not meant to last that long, and certainly the types of pipes that would have been used then were never anticipated to last that long. So we accept that we have a major distribution challenge, but we are facing it frontally. I believe it's $300 million US that partnership will likely take on. Now, the non-revenue water exercise does increase storage in elevation, in areas of high elevation. It does have main replacement. It does install pressure monitors, and it does put in new measures at the household level by way of your meters, digital meters. So it changes the entire network, and it does digitize the network, and we're better able to manage your supply. And if you look at the impact in Kingston and St. Andrew, 55 million gallons to 38 million gallons, you understand what that impact will be over that 10-year period. That will deal with, we believe, the national distribution challenge that we face. The second one, and because of the topical nature of it, which I think I must highlight, is that as a part of our infrastructural development plans, we have developed a program for what we dubbed our Western Water Resilience Strategy. That has a number of components, and we expect that to require some $209 million US, and that looks at the developments that are required pretty much from Trelawney all the way around to Savlamar in Westmoreland. But two elements of it that we will be moving on this year, and I know once we've completed our administrative processes, the Minister of Finance intends to label it a national strategic project, is the replacement of the mains that go into St. James and that go into Negril. These mains are past their useful life. They're neither at the size that is required for the growth that you've seen in population and economic activity there, nor are they sound. There are sections of them that have collapsed, and there are sections of them that are nearing collapse. We will replace these two major pipelines, and it will significantly add to the resilience in the western end of the island. That will be a line from the Martha Brae into St. James, specifically Mobe, and a line from Rossies into Negril. These lines will both increase capacity and increase resilience. We expect to execute this over 2 years because of the volume of construction that is required, and it represents a $70 million US investment. These are major capital investments that will correct the structural issues that cause us to face the worst impacts of drought. We're well aware that our climate has changed and our weather patterns have shifted. The reality is some of these investments should have been made 30 years ago. However, it is this government that is investing at an unprecedented rate to correct the disinvestment in our water sector. But that's of little comfort to those who have no water this morning. And I'd like to speak specifically to communities that are having a particular challenge and assure them that the government is seized of the issue and very concerned about the impact that it is having at the household level, at businesses, and certainly for critical infrastructure. It is why earlier in March the Prime Minister would have instructed that $30 million was sent to the National Water Commission to assist with their trucking expenses in the Brownstown community, which has a particular challenge because of a system failure at the Minard Wells, as well as in Hanover and Westmoreland to facilitate trucking in Negril. We have acknowledged that, as Evan would have told us, that we had no appreciable rainfall in March. As such, the drought has worsened and its impact on citizens has become more severe. Yesterday, the Prime Minister would have announced that he has instructed that $150 million be made available to the varying mechanisms of the state to ensure that we're better able to respond to communities in crisis and households, as well as critical infrastructure in deep need. That $150 million will see 50 constituencies being allocated a base level of 1.5 million Jamaican dollars, and will see MPs in Hanover, Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, and I believe a place called Clarendon, Minister Morgan, an additional $2.5 million allocated to each member of parliament in these areas. And that is specifically because of the severity of the drought in these areas, as well as the impact on NWC systems. It has been done carefully. We've taken a look at all of the impacts, and we know where specific interventions are also required. We've also, in addition to the $100 million that Minister Mackenzie has said the Ministry of Local Government is spending to facilitate continued trucking right across the country, we've made allocations to the parish councils in Hanover, Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, and Clarendon, as well as the St. Ann Parish Council to deal with the issues in Brownstown specifically. This is not the only thing we'll be doing. We continue with our work on our varying black tank programs. It's important that the media and citizens understand that RADA and NIC have a black tank program, that the local government municipalities have their own black tank program, that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation have two distinctly different black tank programs. But we are ensuring that Jamaicans have access to residential storage and agricultural storage at a rate that they've never had before. The Prime Minister announced in his budget presentation last year that we'll make 50,000 tanks available over the next 3 years. This year we have approved budget from the Ministry of Finance to facilitate approximately 10,000 tanks being purchased and distributed. We are also midway in our project for 3,000 rainwater harvesting systems being installed in the 14 constituencies that were most affected in our worst drought last year. Those constituencies admittedly were in the eastern end of the island, as opposed to what we're seeing this year where the western end of the island is having a particular impact. The challenges are great, but they are not insurmountable. And certainly with sound management, with the investment we're making, and of course by God's grace, we will get through this challenge over the next 4 weeks. And certainly with Evans Rain Dance, we expect to be much better off in May. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Minister Morgan has asked me to make a particular point. There are communities that wouldn't have been assessed at the time of this assessment based on when data is available that would now be feeling the impact, because sometimes they're feeling the impact before we get the rain data or the hydrological flow data. There are areas in northern Manchester, specifically northeast Manchester, that we're aware having particular challenges. We're also aware, because of data that would have come to us very late yesterday and even early into this morning, some areas in St. Mary and in western Portland in particular, where rivers and streams have run dry. Whereas we cannot give the specific intervention that we will make in that area, I can assure residents and citizens in these communities we're aware of the challenge. We will increase trucking through our systems at the National Water Commission, and I will meet with Minister Mackenzie today to look at what is required from the parish council level. But we are aware that there are communities that wouldn't have been assessed based on when data would have been available that may require further allocations, and citizens should be aware that we're tracking it very closely, and we will make those allocations when and where necessary.
Thank you very much, Minister Samuda. Thank you for your team for very informative presentations as to the challenges and the solutions, and we will have the camera crew ready when Evan does the rain dance. We need evidence. I want to first apologize on behalf of Minister Fayval Williams. She was to be here this morning, but she had a intervening situation which caused her to be absent. So she extends her sincere apologies to members of the media. And as always, ministers are very accessible, so any questions you can relay them through me or you can reach her directly. We'll now open the floor to members of the media to ask their questions on this particular matter or any other matter that is of national importance. Ms. Francis has custody of the microphones. Ms. Francis.
All right. Good morning, Minister. Morning, everyone. Of course, you know you have to acknowledge, I beg your pardon, just tell your name and the media entity you're from, and I'm acknowledging at this time CVM, I believe.
Good morning, Ramon Gordon, CVM News. Minister, the Prime Minister yesterday announced an interim emergency plan to help mitigate the fallout from drought conditions. Now, the projections have indicated that rains may return by May, but should current conditions persist, how prepared is the government at this time for a protracted dry season? What would it even look like? And also, one other thing, what is the current budgetary allocation for drought management, if you don't mind sharing?
So, first thing I would ask you to do is to pull the negativity from the atmosphere. We certainly do not expect and we certainly do not hope for a protracted drought. That is not in anyone's interest. But yes, the government is prepared for all eventualities. That is why sound fiscal management is important, because you have allocations at NWC in excess of $450 million, and we have allocations at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation and at the Ministry of Local Government for trucking right across the year. We also have a significant contingency fund as a government at the Ministry of Finance that we can pull on in times of challenge. So we are prepared to deal with it. We also continue to coordinate with other government agencies. I expect to bring the Drought Management Committee together for weekly meetings starting this week as we go forward and monitor the situation. But as I said, and I know you have retracted the negativity from the atmosphere, we do expect rain in 4 to 6 weeks to alleviate the drought situation.
Do we have another question?
Yes, we do. It's Observer, right? The Gleaner. Okay, one second.
Good morning, Sashana Small from the Jamaica Gleaner. I have questions for both ministers. Minister Morgan, when is the review of the Access to Information Act going to commence?
Thank you very much. So the review is actually at the AG's department. The Attorney General's department currently has a submission where they are supposed to respond to us. After they have completed that process, then we will have another joint select committee, at which time the law will be updated. I cannot obviously tell you the timeline that the AG's department will take to review the submission that they currently have. But from our side, from the policy side, we have done what we're supposed to do.
Okay, thank you, Minister. It has been with the AG department since 2021, I believe. Is there any sense of urgency to get this matter to
As you can
the
imagine, I cannot speak about the processes at the AG's department. I think that there was an update after 2021 based on concerns raised by members of civil society and others. So it wasn't the same one. There was an update to the one that was there. But I will assure you that this matter is at the top of Cabinet's agenda. It has been discussed at Cabinet on several occasions. It's also a part of our OGP agreements, which means it's something that we're measured on. So we're very interested in getting it executed as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
You're welcome.
Minister Samuda, it has been 6 months since NWC President Mark Barnett was sent on administrative leave. Can you update the country as to where he stands? Is he coming back to work, or is there a negotiation underway for his separation from the agency?
The current president remains on administrative leave. The reports that would have come from the Integrity Commission and certainly the ruling on said reports from the DPP would have given the ministry and indeed the board of NWC great cause for concern. They have followed the processes outlined under our labor laws and our internal procedures faithfully. Based on where that situation is at this stage, I will not comment further, but I can say that I share the concerns of the public and I share the national assessment of the situation, and I expect an announcement soon.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
Morning, Mahiri Stewart from Nationwide News. Question to Minister Samuda. I understand that recently you went on a tour of Southeast St. Anne as part of the Rural Water Household Resilient Program. My question is, what will be the next stops as it regards moving that program forward across the island?
So every Thursday and Friday, I'm on the road, certainly every Thursday once there, and every Friday if there is no Senate. As it relates to the next stops, I was in Westmoreland last week meeting with stakeholders about the current water shortage there. I expect to be in St. Elizabeth and Clarendon again very soon. But ultimately, the next stop for us is implementation. We're very clear of the infrastructural gaps that we have in rural water supply. We've done the first step, which we believe was the Water Resources Master Plan. So we've assessed what our supply is. Our agencies, by way of the National Water Commission and indeed Rural Water Supply Limited, have done, hundreds of engineering assessments and projects for infrastructure right across the country. This is the first time you're able to fund quite a bit of that work. You would notice that we have assigned, or rather allocated to the Rural Water Supply Limited, 1.6 billion Jamaican dollars. That doubles the previous record of 800 million, which came from this government, I believe, in 2017 or 18, to the Rural Water Supply Limited. We're taking the issue of supplying potable water to communities in rural Jamaica on frontally. It is a priority of the government and a priority specifically of the Prime Minister.
Right, and my second question, the opposition spokesperson on water, Mr. Ian Hales, he was somewhat critical of the announced plan to supply Negroes with water through the Roaring River treatment plant. He was suggesting instead that what you do is you you use pipelines from both Roaring River and Cabarita River. Are you satisfied with those plans that are in place to pipeline water from Roaring River to Negril?
I would suggest to you and suggest to Mr. Hales that it is better we take the engineering guidance from those at the National Water Commission and the senior team in the Water Policy Unit at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, as I trust their opinions far more than his.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question online. Actually, it's from two persons, primarily toward the NWC. An update on the Bounty Hall system or the Bounty Hall area in Trelawney. They're experiencing intermittent water lockoffs. And also, there's a question, is there a reduction in the flows to residents in areas in St. Andrew, or is the water flowing at normal? I suppose that without passing judgment on the question, they may be experiencing reduction in the taps.
Mr. Kerr?
No. Oh. Yes. Thank you for your questions. We will we'll investigate further and share the updates. As it relates to Bounty Hall, well, I didn't share the details in my presentation, but the system that currently serves Bounty Hall, which is the Queen of Spain system, 2 of 3 are currently impacted by drought. We are putting together a schedule in place which will be shared with the community and the groups of when water will be, and when and how water will be supplied to the community. So they can reach out to our PR team to get further details on it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Carr.
So just to note, yes, Naomi, as was shared by the Prime Minister from the NWC's report yesterday, the Queen of Spain wells 1 and 4 were impacted by supplies because of the reduced rainfall, as well as the Queen of Spain well number 3 is out of commission. So yes, we would expect lower supply in the area of Bounty Hall, as we expect lower supply nationally at this stage.
All right, we have about 2 more from media again. Ms. Gleaner.
Thank you. Minister Samuda, just to clarify earlier, when you said that you're expecting announcements soon, that is regarding whether or not he'll be coming back to work or his status at the agency?
I would expect the board to comment on the matter soon, as they're going through their assessment and reviewing their legal options. Because it is a matter that does have legal options in front of it, I won't comment further.
Okay, thank you.
I want to be very clear, and it's very important for the public to appreciate. Ministers have zero influence, contact, or anything to do with disciplinary procedures related to public officers. It is outside of our remit as policymakers to interact with that process. So it's very clear. So while it is okay for media to ask ministers questions, the entire process as it relates to whether or not somebody is being disciplined or not has nothing to do with either the cabinet or ministers. So I just want that to be very clear and understood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Minister. I have 2 questions for you, actually. Has the Prime Minister responded to the latest query from the Integrity Commission? And in light of growing public outrage, is the government prepared to encourage the Speaker of the House to release the AG's opinion on how the IC and the Auditor General's reports should be treated?
All right, so the first matter is, I do recall the Prime Minister in his last correspondence to the nation advising that he intended in the short order to respond to whatever queries are made. I suspect the Prime Minister would have done so. The second point is, you have started your question by saying in light of growing public outrage. I do not see any growing public outrage. I see members of the opposition and others seeking to stoke public outrage, right, which has not been stoked. The fact of the matter is the Speaker, previous Speaker, acted in a particular way. The current Speaker acted in a particular way. The current Speaker has articulated very clearly the reasoning behind her acting in that particular way. And the other thing I want to say to you, the executive is separate from Parliament. The Minister of Information sits in the executive. the Parliament is a separate part of the governance structure. So it is very challenging for me, though I may offer an observation on a matter related to the administration and management of Parliament, as we are constantly accused by others of overstepping our limit and commenting on matters and merging the executive and the cabinet. So on one hand, you cannot say that there's a separation of powers, but then on the other hand, you're asking me to opine on an area that is a separate branch of government. It's actually unfair.
Okay, thank you. Yes, final question. One. For Minister Samuda, what's the position on getting new residential developments to have mandatory systems for water harvesting?
The government of Jamaica would have tabled its rainwater harvesting planning guidelines in the Parliament, and they are indeed gazetted and available for all Jamaicans to read. Whereas the government encourages rainwater harvesting, it has not mandated it. There are some areas where rainwater harvesting is appropriate, and then there are some areas and in some types of construction where it is not as appropriate. But I would encourage you to refer to the rainwater harvesting guidelines, as that clearly articulates the government's position on where and when it is appropriate so to use.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question online for Minister Samuda in terms of, well, it says, Minister, can you give us an update on distribution of black tanks? I'd rather call it water tanks, especially in the corporate area. Was there a decision to distribute in the corporate area, though?
The government of Jamaica will ensure that each member of Parliament this year, whether in corporate area or otherwise, have 100 tanks available to them for distribution within their constituent groups. That will leave 3,700 out of our expected budgetary allocation, where the government will target areas which are either outside of the utility footprint, meaning not served by the National Water Commission currently, or in an area where the infrastructure is so degraded that it requires additional storage. The focus of that tank program is not an urban versus rural program. It is being done as per need. The utility footprint, as some may not realize, has sections of the corporate area that are not adequately served. It has obviously many areas in rural Jamaica that are not adequately served, but we're doing it on a constituency by constituency basis, and we've generally been equitable in the distribution of tanks. We have responded to crisis when there is need so to do, but generally we try to, as with roads, as with all other allocations, be equal in what is given to members of Parliament.
Minister, I hope you would go a little bit further for the benefit of the public to outline the process. As a member of Parliament, I have had to subject myself to the process by which, well, not me, but the process of distributing tanks is not just a situation where the government says to an MP, here are 100 tanks, give it away. There's a very detailed process that is involved in it.
So, though said previously in the Parliament by the Prime Minister, there are several tank programs that are underway. The last year's drought, we purchased 3,000 tanks and distributed in the constituencies in the areas that were most affected. That assessment would have been done by the National Water Commission, the Ministry of Local Government, and indeed using the data from the WRA and the Met Service. There is a secondary program that I had mentioned where a further 3,000 tanks were procured along with the accompanying infrastructure to facilitate rainwater harvesting systems. This is being done in 14 constituencies which were most affected last year in the eastern end of the island. There is a social assessment program that is in place where MPs submit 214 names each individually. There is a social assessment committee that actually visits the locations. So we confirm A, that these addresses have no tanks. B, we look at the economic circumstances of households to ensure that it is the most vulnerable that are indeed getting it. We then confirm that the recipient on the list is actually the person at that address. And we have done so, and we could have moved faster, but we have ensured that the persons that are getting those tanks and those systems are indeed those most in need, and that the audit trail is clean. The other matter as it relates to the broader distribution of tanks MPs will not simply give 100 tanks out in a scattered manner. We will provide them with the data as to which communities are indeed or do indeed qualify. This will be based on the utility footprint, both with the National Water Commission's map as well as the utility footprint of the municipal water systems. So it's not for all communities in a haphazard manner. It is specific, and the metrics associated with same will be provided to the members of Parliament and indeed to the country through a ministry paper in Parliament when that distribution of that 10,000 block actually starts. The program, as Minister Morgan would have said, is very involved, and we've ensured that we're approaching it in such a way that those who are most in need and most vulnerable and most water insecure get first. 10,000 won't deal with everyone. We expect that 50,000 should make a significant dent because, as you would know, new developments are indeed required to put in place water storage. So what we're doing is correcting a legacy issue. The other point I would like to make, because I'm not sure it is as widely understood as it should be, is that there is a market capacity for tanks. As we would have found, we may have the budget for 30 and 50,000 tanks in 1 year, but the market capacity to provide 30 to 50,000 tanks in 1 year simply is not currently there. There are 3 or 4 manufacturers, and their capacity is, we believe, almost exhausted. That is because you've had a housing boom, and in that housing boom, you have had requirements for storage that never used to prevail. So many of your larger developers have forward bought the tanks and booked time on the production lines. Now, one also should be aware, well, why not just import them? That's the question you get, because you're shipping in air. It is a large plastic surface with air. The shipping cost of it is particularly challenging, and also shipping at sea, because of the nature of ocean transport, creates a high level of breakage. So that is not necessarily the best option. We have encouraged those in the area of production to ramp up their capacity. I am aware of one who has already made an investment and another company that is likely so to do soon. We expect to significantly increase the capacity of the market with the government's commitment to purchase more water tanks. Ultimately, the issue of storage is not simply a discussion on reservoirs, which the Prime Minister would have gone into the need for expansion of the Mona Reservoir and indeed replacement of the current dam wall at Hermitage yesterday, so I won't detain you with that today. But we do expect to increase storage at our major reservoirs. We do expect to build a new reservoir in new reservoirs in different parts of the country. We do expect to continue our investment in expansion and replacement of community tanks and new tanks where necessary. And yes, we're also working at the household level. The new announcement, or the new component that the Prime Minister would have introduced to the national discourse yesterday, is that we will also, through the Rural Water Supply Limited, be partnering with the Ministry of Education to do an assessment of all educational institutions in the country to make sure that they are also water resilient. I also, Minister Morgan, want to join with the Prime Minister in declaring my disgust in the criminals who would have stolen the water tank from the Negril school. I have instructed the Rural Water Supply Limited to have that tank replaced in the coming days and to ensure that there is no further disruption because of a lack of tank. We continue, however, to coordinate very closely with the Ministry of Education to ensure that schools are indeed served when they're in areas that are challenged. I also would encourage administrators of critical infrastructure, regardless of whether they're educational or health or otherwise, to coordinate closer with the National Water Commission and to not be premature in any decisions, as we do have the capacity to respond. And when we have information, as all of the employees of Water Commission will tell you, and all of the employees of parish councils, you will have persons jumping out at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning if needs be, to ensure that our schools and our health centers are indeed able to function in the morning once we have the information. Thank you.
Minister, thank you for that very detailed response, especially to the distribution of tanks. I believe we have our final question from the floor. Ramon.
Right. Minister Morgan, back to Parliament very quickly. What do you make of the opposition's now ongoing calls for the House Speaker to retract the now controversial letter that was sent to outgoing House Clerk Valerie Curtis. Now, some in civil society have supported the news, while others have said it's much ado about nothing. But what says the government?
Well, as I said to your colleague previously, I'm a member of the cabinet. The parliament is separate. The only thing I will say to you is that murders are down 14%. We're not talking about that this morning. Hundreds of lives have been saved since the start of the year. We're not talking about that this morning, right? What we're talking about is something that is immaterial in the grand scheme of things. What I would love for you to ask me about is the resources that we have given to the police over the last 6 years and the army that has made them able to work with communities to save the lives. Rapes are down 50%, our women are safer. Larceny is down. We passed a law to give stronger punishments against predial larcenies. Those are the things that impact the common Jamaican people on the ground in their daily lives. And I think we need to start focusing on the things that are important to the people of Jamaica. When I go to North Central Clarendon, Minister, nobody's asking me about a letter to the Speaker. They're asking how we're going to get more water, how we're going to fix some roads. Will we get more vehicles for the police stations? And I think we do a disservice to the people of Jamaica to allow others to distract us from holding the government accountable for the things that are so important to the daily lives of the people of Jamaica. And that is my response.
All right, thank you, Minister. I have one more for Minister Samuda. I had asked you earlier the budgetary allocation for drought management. I don't remember if you had answered.
I had answered. There is $450 million for trucking at the National Water Commission. There is in excess of 100 million, I believe it is 102 or something like that at Ministry of Local Government. There is also, as is published in the big yellow budget book, a contingency budget at the Ministry of Finance for emergencies and eventualities such as this.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. And thanks to members of the media. As you notice, we're on a new time. We recognized that there were challenges for some of our friends arriving here due to the traffic. And I'm really happy, and I thank you for making the effort to attend upon the post-cabinet press briefing to really inform the public about the important matters that are taking place in their society. I want to thank the Minister. I also want to thank the Permanent Secretary. I also want to thank members of the NWC, the Water Resources Authority, and the National Irrigation Commission Limited, and all the support staff from the Office of the Prime Minister. Rural Water as well, my apologies, Rural Water. And I'm a country MP, so I'm supposed to, don't punish me, all right? And I also want to thank Jamaica Information Service as well as the team from the Office of the Prime Minister who constantly give us their support, and to you, most importantly, our viewing public who are loyal to us in listening and watching and holding us to account for what the government is doing. Until next time, this has been another post-cabinet press briefing. I ask that you have a very safe day and please slow down on the roads. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.